He invited his poor African ex-girlfriend to his wedding for revenge, but what she did left him speechless. Imagine being invited to the wedding of the man who once broke your heart, only to realize he did it out of spite. Emily Johnson, a strong and independent woman, received a shocking invitation from her wealthy ex-boyfriend, Liam Carter. His intention? To show her what she had lost. But Emily wasn't the fragile woman he expected. Instead of avoiding the event, she walked into it with confidence, stealing the spotlight in a way no one saw coming. And what happened next left Liam shattered. Before we dive into this jaw-dropping story, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss an incredible tale like this. Now, let's begin. Liam Carter sat in his high-rise office, the city of New York stretching far beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. The skyline gleamed under the afternoon sun, but he barely noticed. His gaze was locked onto the ivory and gold wedding invitation resting in his hands. The thick, expensive cardstock was embossed with his and Jessica Williams's names, an extravagant announcement of the union between two powerful, wealthy individuals. Yet it wasn't the grandeur of the occasion that had him lost in thought. It was the name on a special envelope sitting separately from the others. Emily Johnson. He exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening as old memories surfaced. Emily, the woman who had once been everything to him, who had loved him before the wealth, before the recognition, before he became CEO of Carter Enterprises. She had been there when he had nothing, believing in him when no one else did. And yet, she was also the woman who had left. At least, that's how he chose to remember it. His fingers tapped the edge of the envelope as a smirk curled on his lips. This invitation wasn't a kind gesture. It was a message, a final act of control, a way to show her what she had lost. "Send this one personally," he instructed his assistant without looking up. The young woman hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Right away, Mr. Carter." As she exited, Liam leaned back in his chair, staring at the New York skyline with satisfaction. "Let's see if you're as strong as you claim to be, Emily." Across the city, Emily Johnson sat in her modest yet cozy apartment, completely unaware of the storm heading her way. She had spent the past few years rebuilding herself after Liam. Working as an investigative journalist, she had found purpose in telling stories that mattered, exposing corruption, and making a name for herself, not as someone's ex-girlfriend, but as a force of her own. When her best friend Ava arrived, Emily was balancing a mug of coffee in one hand and typing with the other. "Tell me why I had to rush over here," Ava huffed, throwing her purse onto the couch. "Did another politician accidentally text you their mistress's number?" Emily chuckled. "I wish. This is different." She turned the envelope in her hands. It was heavier than a normal invitation, and the gold lettering felt deliberately excessive. "Liam Carter and Jessica Williams request the honor of your presence at their wedding." Ava froze mid-step. "Oh, hell no." Emily raised an eyebrow. "I haven't even said anything yet." Ava snatched the invitation from her hands, reading it as her expression twisted into a mix of anger and disbelief. "Please tell me you're going to set this on fire." Emily leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. Tempting, but no. Ava's eyes widened. "Emily, no. You cannot go to this. It's a trap." Emily let out a slow breath. "I know it is. Liam isn't inviting me out of kindness. He wants me to see him at the peak of his success, standing next to a woman who fits into his perfect world. So don't give him the satisfaction." Emily smiled, but there was no bitterness in it, Oh, I won't. He expects me to be heartbroken, to feel small. But what if I went, and instead of giving him what he wants, I reminded him that I don't need him, that I never did? Ava groaned, dropping onto the couch. You're seriously doing this, aren't you? Emily nodded. Fine. Ava threw up her hands. But if this turns into some messy reality TV moment, I want full credit for predicting it. Emily laughed, but deep down, she knew this wasn't about revenge. It was about proving to herself that Liam no longer had power over her. Meanwhile, at Carter Enterprises, Liam was going through final wedding preparations. Jessica stood beside him, her designer gown clinging to her body as she looked over the seating arrangements. You're sure about the guest list? Liam barely glanced up. Why wouldn't I be? Jessica pursed her lips. I just noticed her name. Liam's fingers stilled on the table. And? Jessica sighed. Liam, I don't care about your past, but inviting an ex to our wedding? Especially her. What are you trying to prove? His jaw tightened, but he forced a smirk. Nothing. Just thought it would be interesting to see how she's doing. Jessica wasn't convinced. She knew Liam well enough to recognize when he was hiding something, but instead of pushing, she simply said, I hope you know what you're doing. Liam did. At least he thought he did. The day of the wedding arrived, and Emily made sure she would not go unnoticed. She stepped out of the black car in a gown that was both elegant and bold. The silk hugged her figure in a way that spoke of confidence, not arrogance. Heads turned the moment she entered the grand reception hall, the chandeliers casting a golden glow over the extravagance of it all. And then Liam saw her. His smirk faltered, his breath hitched. Emily wasn't just present. She was breathtaking. She wasn't the woman he had left behind. She was stronger, more radiant, and the way she carried herself told him something he hadn't expected. She had moved on. Jessica, standing at his side, immediately noticed his reaction. Her grip on his arm tightened as her gaze flickered between him and Emily. Liam, she whispered, why are you looking at her like that? But Liam couldn't answer. For the first time, he was the one feeling small. Emily met his eyes across the room, but instead of sadness or longing, there was only amusement. She knew exactly why he had invited her, and she had just turned his own game against him. As she walked further into the reception, guests whispered, stealing glances at her. Liam could feel his carefully curated moment slipping through his fingers. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He had invited her to prove a point. But now, as he watched her captivate the room without even trying, he realized the truth. He was the one who had lost. Liam Carter had always been a man in control. His wealth, influence, and sharp business acumen ensured that he dictated the terms of every situation. But as he stood at the entrance of his extravagant wedding reception, watching Emily Johnson move through the room like a force of nature, he felt something he hadn't in years: uncertainty. She wasn't supposed to look like that. She wasn't supposed to be like that. He had envisioned this night differently. Emily would arrive looking uncomfortable, overwhelmed by the luxury surrounding her. She would steal glances at him with regret in her eyes, silently yearning for the life she could have had. But instead, she was thriving. Dressed in a silk gown that accentuated her confidence, Emily greeted guests with a poised smile, effortlessly navigating the elite world he once thought she would never belong to. And the worst part, she wasn't even looking at him. Jessica Williams, his fiancée, stood beside him, gripping his arm with just enough pressure to snap him out of his daze. "She's stunning," Jessica murmured, her tone unreadable. Liam forced a smirk. "Didn't expect her to show up." Jessica let out a soft chuckle, but her fingers remained tight around his wrist. "Didn't you? You wanted her to see this, Liam. And now she's here." The words sat heavy between them. Jessica wasn't naive. She knew there was history between Liam and Emily, but she had believed it was buried. Now, seeing Liam's reaction, she wasn't so sure. Meanwhile, Emily had no intention of playing into Liam's ego. She had arrived prepared for the spectacle, fully aware that many in the room would recognize her as Liam Carter's ex. But she didn't care. She was here to prove, to herself more than anyone else, that she was beyond the past. A waiter passed by, offering champagne. She accepted a flute and took a slow sip, allowing herself a moment to soak in the irony of it all. Once upon a time, she had imagined this life with Liam. She had supported him through sleepless nights, through failed deals, through moments of doubt, when he wondered if he would ever make it to the top. And now, here he was, at the top. Yet he didn't look as victorious as he should have. A familiar voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Well, well, I almost didn't recognize you." Emily turned to find Ethan Graves, one of Liam's longtime business partners, staring at her with a mixture of admiration and surprise. She smiled. "Ethan, it's been a while." He let out a low whistle. "More than a while. Last I heard, you were chasing stories across the world. I didn't expect to see you here." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Neither did I." Ethan studied her for a moment before glancing at Liam across the room. "He invited you, didn't he?" Emily laughed softly. "Of course he did. And you came anyway." She sipped her champagne. "Of course I did." Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "That's what I always liked about you, Emily. You never let Liam win easily." Emily smiled, but before she could respond, she felt his presence approaching. She didn't have to turn to know Liam was standing behind her. The sudden hush in nearby conversations, the subtle shift in the energy of the room, it was unmistakable. Slowly, she turned to face him. Liam looked at her, really looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. "I didn't think you'd come," he said, his voice lower than she remembered. Emily tilted her head, feigning curiosity. "Why wouldn't I? It's not every day I get invited to such a grand event." Liam's jaw clenched. He had expected her to be distant, maybe even bitter, but she was calm, in control, untouched by whatever game he had tried to play. Jessica appeared at his side, looping her arm through his, a perfect picture of composure. "Emily, it's nice to finally meet you. Liam has told me so much about you." Emily turned her attention to Jessica, taking in the perfectly styled blonde waves, the flawless designer gown, the poised yet slightly guarded smile. "I'm sure he has," Emily said smoothly. Jessica held her gaze for a moment before speaking again. "I hope you're enjoying the reception." Emily smiled. "Immensely." Liam could feel the tension between the two women, though neither of them displayed it outright. This wasn't how tonight was supposed to go. He had imagined Emily looking at him with regret, but instead, it was he who couldn't look away. Ethan, sensing the awkwardness, decided to break the moment. "Emily, dance with me." Emily arched an eyebrow, but took his outstretched hand without hesitation. "I'd love to." As Ethan led her to the dance floor, Liam's hands curled into fists. Jessica leaned in, whispering, "Are you going to pretend that didn't just get under your skin?" Liam didn't respond. He was too busy watching Emily in Ethan's arms, laughing, moving effortlessly to the music. And for the first time in his life, Liam Carter felt like he was losing. Liam Carter prided himself on his ability to stay in control. Whether in the boardroom, in negotiations, or even in his personal life, he was always the one calling the shots. But as he stood at the edge of the dance floor, watching Emily glide effortlessly in Ethan's arms, something inside him tightened, a feeling he wasn't used to. Jealousy. She wasn't just dancing. She was glowing. Every step, every turn, every subtle smile she exchanged with Ethan was deliberate. She was showing Liam exactly what he had lost, and worse, she wasn't even doing it for him. Jessica must have noticed his clenched jaw, because she murmured, "You're staring." Liam forced a smirk. "Am I?" Jessica's nails lightly traced his arm, though her tone carried a hint of sharpness. "You've barely looked at me all night." Liam turned to her, placing a hand on her waist. "That's not true." She gave a hollow laugh. "Liam, I'm not an idiot." His grip tightened, but before he could respond, the song changed, and Ethan spun Emily into a graceful dip, earning an impressed murmur from the guests. Liam's gaze darkened. He had seen Ethan flirt before, but this was different. This wasn't just playfulness. This was a statement. Jessica took a slow sip of her champagne. "If you want to dance with her so badly, just go." Liam's head snapped toward her, but Jessica only shrugged. "You and I both know that's what you want." For a moment, neither spoke. Then, without another word, Liam strode toward the dance floor. Ethan grinned as he twirled Emily again. "I think you just made history. I've never seen Liam look that pissed off at a wedding that's supposed to be his." Emily let out a soft laugh. "Didn't do anything." Ethan arched a brow. "You sure about that?" Before she could answer, she felt a presence beside her. A familiar, intoxicating presence. She turned, and there he was, Liam. Standing mere inches away, his gaze locked onto her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. "Mind if I cut in?" Liam's voice was smooth, controlled, but Emily knew better. He was anything but. Ethan hesitated, glancing between the two of them. He was no fool. He could see the storm brewing beneath Liam's carefully composed expression. With a knowing smirk, Ethan stepped back. "Be my guest." Liam didn't waste a second. He extended his hand to Emily, his eyes daring her to refuse. She hesitated, not because she was intimidated, but because she knew this moment, was exactly what Liam had wanted from the start. Power. But she wouldn't give it to him. Not entirely. With a slow, deliberate movement, she placed her hand in his. The moment their fingers touched, something unspoken passed between them. A history. 1,000 unsaid words. The music swelled and they moved. The way Liam guided her across the floor was instinctive, as if they had danced together 100 times before. His hand rested firmly on her waist, fingers pressing just enough to remind her who was leading. But Emily refused to let him dictate the rhythm. "You always did like to be the center of attention," she said lightly, her gaze unbothered. Liam's lips curled. "Says the woman who walked in here like she owned the place. I wasn't the one who sent an invitation expecting someone to crumble." His grip on her waist tightened slightly. "Is that what you think? That I invited you here to watch you fall apart?" She arched an eyebrow. "Didn't you?" Liam exhaled, his expression unreadable. I thought I knew what I wanted. Emily tilted her head. And now? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied her, the way her eyes sparkled under the chandeliers, the way her lips parted just slightly when she was thinking. He had spent years convincing himself that he had moved on, that Emily was just a chapter in his past. But now, standing this close to her, feeling the warmth of her skin through the fabric of her dress, he realized the truth. He had never stopped wanting her. The realization hit him harder than he was prepared for. Emily, however, wasn't fazed. If she felt anything, she didn't let it show. She moved with effortless grace, maintaining just enough distance to remind him that she was in control now. "You look beautiful tonight," he murmured. She met his gaze without hesitation. "I know." A slow smirk spread across his lips. "You haven't changed." Emily tilted her head slightly. "Oh, but I have." His fingers brushed against the small of her back, a move so subtle it could be mistaken for nothing. But she knew better. "You really think this bothers me?" she asked, her tone cool. Liam's grip tightened. "I don't know. Does it?" Emily let out a soft chuckle, one that sent a flicker of something dangerous through Liam's chest. "I'm not the same girl you left behind, Liam," she whispered, leaning in just enough for him to feel the warmth of her breath against his skin. For the first time in years, Liam Carter, CEO, billionaire, the man who always had the upper hand, felt like he had just lost his footing. And as the dance ended, Emily slowly pulled away, slipping out of his grasp, leaving Liam standing there, wanting more. Liam Carter had faced high-stakes business deals, ruthless negotiations, and competitors who would do anything to see him fail. Yet nothing had ever left him as unsteady as watching Emily walk away after their dance. She didn't spare him a second glance, didn't hesitate. She simply turned on her heel and disappeared into the crowd, leaving him standing there, fists clenched, hungry for more. Jessica was already watching him when he returned to her side. "You enjoyed that a little too much," she said, her tone light but edged with something sharp. Liam picked up a glass of whiskey from a passing waiter, taking a slow sip before meeting her gaze. "It was just a dance." Jessica let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. "Liam, please, you think I don't know what's happening here?" His smirk faltered. "What are you talking about?" Jessica leaned in, her lips barely an inch from his ear, as she whispered, "You invited her to prove a point. But tell me, Liam, who exactly were you trying to prove it to?" Liam's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Jessica stepped back. Her blue eyes searched his, and something flickered there. Doubt. She was beautiful, elegant, the kind of woman who fit perfectly into the world he had built. But at that moment, standing in her designer gown, wrapped in wealth and perfection, she looked more like a stranger than his future wife. And suddenly, he felt suffocated. Jessica took a sip of her champagne, her lips curling into a knowing smile. "You should go find her." Liam frowned. "What?" She tilted her head. "It's what you want, isn't it? To chase after the one who walked away?" Liam said nothing. Jessica exhaled, as if making peace with something she had known all along. "Go ahead, Liam. But let me be clear about one thing. If you leave now, don't come back." She didn't wait for a response. Instead, she turned and walked away, graceful in her own defeat. And just like that, Liam's carefully constructed life, the one he had spent years building, started to crack. Emily stood outside on the grand balcony, letting the crisp night air cool the warmth lingering on her skin. The dance with Liam had been a test, a reminder that no matter how much money or power he had gained, he no longer had control over her. She should have felt satisfied, triumphant even. But why, then, did her chest feel so tight? Enjoying the view? She turned at the sound of his voice, already knowing who it was. Liam stood at the doorway, his tie slightly loosened, his eyes unreadable. There was something almost desperate in the way he looked at her. Emily let out a soft breath, turning back toward the city lights. "It's a beautiful night." Liam took slow steps toward her, the air between them thick with something unsaid. "You should have never come." Emily's lips curved slightly. "Then why did you invite me?" Silence stretched between them. Liam placed both hands on the railing beside her, boxing her in. She didn't move, didn't flinch. Instead, she looked up at him, her expression calm, composed. "I wanted you to see what you lost," Liam finally admitted, his voice rough. Emily tilted her head, eyes sharp. "And?" Liam exhaled. His hands tightened against the marble railing. "I lost," he whispered. Emily's heart clenched. She wasn't supposed to care. She had promised herself she wouldn't. But looking at him now, raw, unguarded, vulnerable in a way she had never seen before, she realized something. Liam Carter had spent years building his empire, rising to the top, surrounding himself with luxury, power, and a woman who was supposed to be his perfect match. But at the end of it all, he was still empty. Emily swallowed the lump in her throat. "Liam, you made your choice a long time ago." His eyes darkened. "And you made yours." She nodded. "Yes, and I don't regret it." Liam's jaw clenched. "Not even a little." Emily took a deep breath, steadying herself. "No." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, he reached for her. His fingers brushed against her wrist, light, hesitant, as if afraid she would pull away. And for a split second, she almost didn't. But then she stepped back, breaking the contact. Liam's face hardened. Emily looked up at him, her voice quiet but firm. "You wanted me here to remind me of what I lost. But tonight, Liam, all you did was remind yourself." She turned and walked away. And this time, he didn't try to stop her. Liam Carter had won at everything in life. But tonight, he had lost the one thing that had ever truly mattered. Liam Carter stood frozen on the balcony, staring at the empty space where Emily had been just moments ago. The night air was cool against his skin, but it did nothing to numb the fire burning inside him. He had invited her here to prove a point, to make her see what she had lost. But instead, he had watched her walk away, completely untouched by his presence. And for the first time in his life, Liam felt powerless. Behind him, the music from the reception hall played on, the laughter of guests blending with the clinking of champagne glasses. His wedding, the event that was supposed to be the pinnacle of his success, was still in full swing. But for Liam, it might as well have been over, because he knew deep down that everything had already fallen apart. "Still standing out here?" Liam turned at the sound of Ethan Graves's voice. His old friend leaned against the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching him with an expression that was somewhere between amusement and pity. Liam forced a smirk. "Enjoying the show?" Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "Oh, I stopped watching a while ago, but I've got to say, Liam, I've never seen you lose your grip like this." Liam's jaw tightened. "I'm not losing anything." Ethan lifted a brow. Aren't you? Liam didn't respond. Ethan exhaled, stepping closer. Jessica left. Liam's head snapped up. What? Ethan nodded toward the entrance. She's gone. Took her family with her. Liam's stomach twisted. He had expected tension, anger even, but he hadn't expected Jessica to actually leave. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to suppress the frustration bubbling inside him. Did she say anything? Ethan smirked. Yeah, she said, and I quote, "Tell Liam he can keep chasing ghosts. I'm done." Liam let out a slow breath. Jessica had always been sharp, always aware. She had seen the writing on the wall long before he did. Ethan studied him. So what now? Liam didn't answer. He didn't have one. For the first time in his life, he didn't know what came next. Emily walked through the city streets, her heels clicking softly against the pavement. The cold air bit at her skin, but she welcomed it. She needed something real, something sharp to ground her. Tonight had gone exactly as she had expected. Liam had invited her to his wedding, hoping to see her break. But in the end, he was the one who had shattered. And yet, despite it all, Emily's heart still ached. Because for a split second, when she had looked into Liam's eyes, she had seen something she wasn't prepared for. Regret. She had spent years convincing herself that he had never loved her, that he had only ever loved his ambition, his hunger for power. But tonight, she had seen the truth. Liam had loved her, maybe still did, but love, no matter how deep, wasn't always enough. As she hailed a cab, Emily took one last look at the city skyline. She had walked away once before. Tonight, she had done it again. But why, then, did it feel so much harder this time? Liam Carter sat alone in his hotel suite, the city stretching beneath him through the massive glass windows. The New York skyline, usually a testament to his achievements, now felt suffocating. The whiskey in his glass barely burned as he swallowed it, his mind still replaying the events of the night. Jessica was gone. The wedding, his wedding, was in ruins. But none of that mattered as much as the one thing he couldn't change. Emily had left. He had spent years believing that power, success, and status would fill the void she had left behind. He had convinced himself that wealth was the ultimate revenge, that one day she would look at him with regret for ever walking away. But tonight, he had been the one drowning in regret. She had looked at him, not with sorrow or longing, but with indifference, and that had cut deeper than any rejection ever could. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. He considered ignoring it, but something inside him, the last flicker of a desperate hope, made him stand. When he opened the door, he didn't know who he expected to see. But it wasn't Ethan. Liam exhaled sharply. "What the hell do you want?" Ethan stepped inside uninvited, hands in his pockets, his usual smugness replaced by something more serious. "Just making sure you're still breathing." Liam turned back toward the window, sipping his drink. "As you can see, I'm fine." Ethan scoffed. "Yeah, you look fantastic. Sitting in a dark hotel room, drinking alone on what was supposed to be your wedding night." Liam shot him a glare, but Ethan didn't back down. "So tell me," Ethan continued, leaning against the bar, "was it worth it?" Liam stiffened. "What?" "Inviting Emily. Trying to prove whatever the hell you were trying to prove." Liam set his glass down harder than necessary. "I wasn't trying to prove anything." Ethan chuckled. "Right. You just happened to invite your ex-girlfriend, who you haven't spoken to in years, to your wedding. No agenda at all." Liam ran a hand through his hair. I thought it would bring me closure. Ethan folded his arms. And did it? Liam didn't answer, because they both knew the truth. The moment Emily walked through those doors, Liam's carefully built world had started to crumble. Ethan sighed. Look, man, I know you don't want to hear this, but you need to let her go. Liam's jaw clenched. She was never mine to hold on to. Ethan studied him for a moment before shaking his head. That's the first honest thing you've said all night. Without another word, he turned and left. Liam stared after him, the silence of the room pressing against his chest. He had won in life. He had everything he ever wanted. So why did it feel like he had lost everything? Emily sat in her apartment, curled up on the couch with a cup of tea she had no intention of drinking. The city lights twinkled outside, but her mind was elsewhere. She had walked away. Again. So why did it feel so much harder this time? Ava's voice broke through her thoughts. You okay? Emily blinked, realizing her best friend was watching her from the kitchen. She forced a small smile. Yeah, just processing. Ava walked over and plopped onto the couch beside her. Processing the fact that your ex-fiancé blew up his own wedding over you? Emily sighed. It's not like that. Ava scoffed. Emily, he called off his wedding at the altar. If that's not about you, I don't know what is. Emily shook her head. It doesn't change anything. Ava studied her carefully. Doesn't it? Emily hesitated. She had seen the way Liam looked at her tonight, not with arrogance, not with control, but with regret. For the first time, she wasn't sure if walking away was the right choice. Because deep down, a part of her still wondered if he could change. Liam sat in his penthouse, staring at the empty glass in his hands. Everything he had built, his success, his image, his empire, felt meaningless. Jessica was gone. His wedding was over before it even began. But Emily, she was still out there. He had spent years pretending he didn't care. Tonight proved he had been lying to himself all along. For the first time, Liam Carter didn't know what to do. Emily was leaving New York. She had made up her mind. The city held too many ghosts, and she was done chasing memories. But as she stepped outside her apartment, he was there. Liam, standing in the rain, soaked, desperate. Don't go, he said, breathless. Emily's heart clenched. She should have walked away. But she didn't. Liam stared into Emily's eyes, searching for something. Hope, forgiveness, anything. I was wrong, he admitted. About everything. About you. About us. Emily swallowed hard. Liam. I don't care about the past, he whispered. I just need to know. Is there still a chance? Silence stretched between them. Then, finally, she smiled. Not because she was weak, but because, after everything, she still loved him too. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video. Would you have given Liam a second chance? Let us know in the comments below.